Welcome to the last real stage, and there's going to be a lot more knife-throwing putties in this one than in any of the others. And I'd say that's kind of a good thing, but the reddish putties in particular are painfully hesitant, as you're seeing here. They slowly inch forward, ensuring that they'll never reach you in time to do any damage. The first half of this stage is pretty much empty on hazards, but I do like these two slopes. For some reason I do just about the only wrong thing you can do when you're battling putties on slopes and try to jump up at them. I'm not sure why I did that when using normal combos would suffice just fine. Also, I want to thank the game for putting green putties on slopes finally, which is probably the most interesting place you could put them. It took them a while, but to be fair, there weren't that many slopes in the game to begin with. There is an enemy type that's introduced only for this stage, and it's actually kinda cool. These sword guys, one of them's going to appear on the left right now, have an enhanced range just like the mace enemies from stage 2, only these ones use their attacks frequently enough for it to matter. They're also pretty efficient at knocking you out of the air, so they're enemies that you actually genuinely have to approach carefully until you turn into your ranger form, at which point your range greatly outclasses theirs and you don't have to worry anymore. Regardless of which form you face them in though, it's always a good idea to get them on one side, because if they surrounded you, then you're going to get murdered either way. Having them on one side gives you a lot more time and space to work with in deciding how to approach them. You may have thought when I said I appreciate all the slopes that I only meant the slopes back there toward the start, but no, this whole first half of the stage is full of slopes. And as a result, in spite of it not having any laser drones or falling chandeliers, it's pretty entertaining, and I get hit a lot more than I did when there were falling chandeliers and laser drones. Not enough for it to really matter, but still, I got hit here a couple of times. Two more sword enemies appearing, and like I said, we want to get them on one side. They don't take too many hits for how tough they are otherwise. We are now in ranger form, and immediately a bunch of knife-throwing putties and sword putties swarm the screen, and the idea is just to stay as low as possible. Unfortunately, as you saw, I stuck my head up long enough to get hit by both the sword and knife. But that mistake doesn't repeat itself. There's a single knife-throwing putty right here, but immediately after him is one of the slopiest areas to ever slope. There isn't much time to form any real strategy though, you just kinda have to react to everything coming at you. And I hope you're a good listener because that barrel is deceptively hidden pretty well by the guardrails on the steps. Just like in the second stage, it's a good idea to always put evading the barrels above hitting the enemies, because the enemies will be there later, and they're much slower and less aggressive than the barrel, in spite of the barrel being, you know, an object. So yeah, this section is kinda hectic up until the very end, where it's just two normal green putties. And like I said, green putties on slopes are the best place for green putties. But the strategies for fighting them don't even change all that much. Still, it's a pretty fun section that requires you to think on your feet, and if the enemies dealt more significant damage, it might actually be kinda tense. Hey look, a throwable barrel. Again, those don't deal any significant damage to the enemies, but you can at least use it to take out one of the weaker putties. And on this next screen, they give you two barrels explicitly for the purpose of destroying two putties that only go down in one hit. Because that's all they're good for, really. At least the game knows what they're good for. And it even gave you an entire screen to demonstrate that. This next screen is kind of interesting because there's a laser drone that flies across the top, but instead of shooting a single laser, it shoots multiple. And usually you have enough time to see the lasers coming, even if they do fall pretty fast. But I like to default to crouching position, so you can easily shift left or right to avoid any laser that might be coming down on top of you. It helps that the game gives you a pretty lenient hitbox while you're ducking, so that way it's really hard for the laser to hit you anyway. As for this next section, there are yet more slopes, but instead of forcing you to think on your feet, these ones are pretty methodical. It goes barrel, guy with gun, barrel, guy with gun. So it's pretty easy to figure out what's going to happen next. You also have as much time and space to avoid the barrel as you could possibly need. So after you get hit by the first barrel and the first man with the gun, there's really no excuse. For some reason though, after we leave the slopes, there's just a couple of screens of enemies that we already know how to deal with nothing special. You already know how to deal with the throwing knife putties, and you already know how to deal with the green putties. So these couple of screens are kinda filler. The game is remarkably low on filler, all things considered, especially with how easy it is. Welcome to this weird sci-fi laboratory place where we again have laser drones that carpet bomb the place with lasers. The same strategy I highlighted before still applies here, but after the laser drone is done, we still have 3 green putties to deal with. I recommend kicking or throwing them off the screen as we did in Stage 4. The next screen is kind of a weird little intermission. It has 2 really weak putties and 2 normal knife-throwing putties. Similar to that screen with the 2 barrels. This next screen has another big laser, but we can destroy this one before it poses any threat, thus mitigating the entire point of this screen. Maybe they shouldn't have made the laser so visible. I didn't actually mean to use the screen clearing attack right there, but we're not going to be using it on the boss anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I appreciate the way this stage slowly took us from the caverns all the way up into this weird sci-fi laboratory place with all the blinking lights. That's actually kinda cool. They start mixing some throwing knife enemies with the jumping putties in here, and my go-to strategy, as always, is to jump around like a lunatic and push them off the screen, where they deal the minimal amount of damage. Seemed to work particularly well that time. We get another free elevator ride just like the last stage, but this one's a lot shorter and it leads to something kind of more interesting. A huge loud alarm followed by a huge loud laser. You can't say they don't give you plenty of time to see it coming because the alarm blasts for quite a while. Thankfully there are so many holes up and below you that there's pretty much no way for you to get hit unless you're not paying any attention at all. The putties, on the other hand, are really stupid, so they'll consistently get hit right in the face with the laser and end up falling to their death. And by to their death, I mean on their backs, where they promptly explode. Doesn't take long to reach the laser itself, and after you do, you just have to smack it enough times. It helps to remember that you can turn around in mid-combo, so that way you can keep the putties off your back. After we successfully destroy the cannon, there's another screen with a big laser, but we can't actually destroy this one. It successfully hangs back far enough that we can't actually reach it, though it tends to fire its laser kind of randomly, making it less effective than the laser drones we've already seen earlier in the level. Maybe if the laser cannon fired multiple shots or some kind of scatter shot that would fix the problem, but as it stands, it's useless. This is the final screen before the boss, and it is also full of useless enemies. Welcome to the level 5 boss fight against Dark Warrior, my favorite boss in the game. He moves around a lot more fluidly than the other characters, he's a lot less predictable, and he's really fun to fight. The basic strategy I use with this guy is to stay in the air when he stays in the air, which basically just means jumping back and forth a lot, but it stops you from getting hit by him. Eventually he'll stop jumping around so he can attempt to skewer you, but you'll notice when he's about to do this because he starts spinning like Sonic the Hedgehog. Very easy to just kick him out of that. He's most vulnerable to your attacks right after he finishes teleporting, where you can actually get a full combo in on him if you time it right. Just don't be overzealous, or he'll teleport away immediately. There are some times where he'll stop in mid-jump to throw a bomb, but if you just keep jumping back and forth with him, usually he won't bother with this, and even if he does, you'll jump over it. He'll also reappear sometimes with a sickle and chain instead of a sword, and this is his ranged weapon, but it's easily jumped over, and even if it weren't, it does take him forever to use it, so you have plenty of time to react. He does have a whole lot of moves at his disposal and move around the screen a whole lot, but as complicated as this might look, the basic idea is just always stay in the air when he's in the air, and as soon as he teleports, that's your opening.